Welcome, I'm the Deadwood Jedi. This is another Raid Shadow Legends video. I'm obviously doing my Ice Golem runs in the background as we're still trying to get the fragments to fuse Operdin, the Clan Father. And I know a lot of you probably skipped out on that. I feel bad I didn't put a video out saying you need to do this fusion. I think he is going to be very good and useful for most people out there in the player base. If you're endgame, maybe not as much, but is not a trash champion. Definitely somebody worth getting. But in the meantime, what I do want to talk about is I want to talk Guurda Bogbrew, a new daily login reward champion that we're going to be getting. It's going to be following Scion. When the Scion rotation ends, I think on January 30th, you'll be able to start getting fragments for Guurda Bogbrew. It's an okay champion, legendary Ogre tribes. I'm not super excited about it, but certainly an interesting and unique kit with some interesting abilities that she has. I don't feel like she's going to be very useful in most areas of this game, but for things like Doom Tower and for things like, you know, PvE content, dungeon runs, that sort of thing, should be pretty decent, I would say. But let's take a look at the champion really quick so you understand what I'm talking about. This is Guurda Bogbrew, a hideous creature. It's, I mean, the art department here, they always go above and beyond, even if it's totally in the wrong vein. It's kind of an interesting champion look. I like the very, you know, it's a Ogre, so we don't have a lot of those champions. Unfortunately, I don't really feel like this is, you know, a great legendary addition to the game. But you're not going to be able to pull them from Sacred Shards. It is just like every other login champion, but kind of an interesting kit. There's some unique things about it that I think we can go over really quickly. So if we go ahead and talk about the kit here, we can see she's got 3 skills and a passive. Her A1 attacks one enemy, 60% chance of placing or applying debuff spread effect, taking one random debuff from the target and placing on all enemies under weakened debuffs. Decreases the target's turn meter by 10% if they're not under any debuff. So at the very least, this is at least a decent debuff or turn meter reduction skill, right? That's not bad. Turn meter reduction on an A1 skill is nice. The debuff spread is okay. I don't like the conditions, and there's a lot of conditions on this champion. That's probably the biggest negative about her. The fact you have to have weaken on everybody first is less optimal. A2 attacks all enemies, 80% chance of placing a 25% weaken debuff for 2 turns. After attacking, has an 80% chance of placing 2 5% poison debuffs for 2 turns on all enemies without weaken debuffs. These poison debuffs cannot be blocked or resisted. I would imagine that this is going to book up to 100% on both of those things. Now, kind of an interesting skill, right? Attacks all enemies, always great. A 25% weaken is fine, right? It's 100% chance to land weaken. That's not a bad skill. And then a chance to place placing the 2 poison debuffs that can't be resisted or blocked. That's really nice. Anytime you can place a debuff that's not blocked or resisted, that's good. Of course, you still have to land the weaken debuff, or at least that has to be out there on these champions. Makes it a lot less viable. The fact that that's a non-blocked resisted poison kind of goes counter to the fact that it's bringing a weakened debuff as well. If they had moved that to one of the other skills, I would have been much more excited about it, but not super happy about that. Still, if you're going to build this champion with accuracy, that's not really a negative so much. So getting a weaken and 2 poisons on one skill is not bad. My guess is this is going to book down to a 3-turn cooldown as well. You can see it has a 4-turn cooldown there. That's already pretty low, and most of those kind of skills will book down at least 1 more cooldown. So if that's on a 3-turn, that's actually not a bad skill at all. And then we have the A3 here, has an 80% chance of removing 1 random buff from all enemies, then an 80% chance of placing 2 poison debuffs on all enemies for 2 turns, also removes 2 random debuffs from all allies. And this is actually a pretty nice skill. You got a ally cleanse, two debuffs, right? So, you know, one skill debuff or 1 debuff randomly is not great, but 2's pretty solid. It's not going to fully cleanse your team, but that's not a bad thing, especially when you add the fact that it's adding a couple of poisons and stripping one of the buffs from the enemies. So there's definitely some good potential to that. Stripping only 1 buff from enemies, not the best, right? It really isn't, because, you know, if you're like in arena and somebody has shields up and immunity, well, guess which one we want to remove? It's just the immunity. We don't care about the shields, so not that great, but still useful, right? Not a bad thing. The cleanse on the allies, and then also being able to place the poisons. Now, once again, If these poisons were unresistible, all of a sudden this champion would have a lot more viability all throughout the game, because you're getting, hey, we got poisons coming on 2 different skills and they can't be resisted. I don't even have to build accuracy if I don't want to. As it is, pretty much every skill on this champion's kit requires accuracy anyway, so it is what it is, but that's not so bad, right? 4 poisons in total in the kit is not a bad totality of it, right? Plus we get the weaken, plus we get some cleansing. There's some good, decent abilities in this. And then we have the passive. Whenever an enemy receives a debuff, their turn meter is decreased by 3%. Not my favorite thing, to be honest with you guys, right? Obviously, decreasing turn meter is great, but that requires you to continually placing debuffs on the enemy. That's not an easy thing to do, and the turn meter decrease is only 3%. It's nothing game breaking, but it's not a bad passive, right? It's one of those things where it doesn't matter what area of the game I'm in, pretty much, unless there's certain bosses that can't have their turn meter decreased, it's still going to be pretty useful all the way through. This is why I say this is going to be a solid champion for Doom Tower and for dungeon runs, because you're going to be reducing the enemy turn meter, giving yourself more turns. Overall, and my guess too, that A3 is probably going to book down to a 3-turn cooldown as well. If it stays a 4-turn cooldown, this is not a great champion. It's like, B, C tier. If that does book down to a 3-turn cooldown, I see this being a pretty solid champion, right? We're getting 4 poisons out there. We're getting weaken, and we're getting a free cleanse and a little bit of a buff strip off the enemy. It's not too bad. Plus a lot of turn meter reduction stuff. Now, again, where is this champion going to be good? These are the questions, right? Could actually be really good for what I'm running in the background here. Ice golems, right? We're getting a lot of poisons out there. The weakens, whatever. But we're also getting some turn meter decreasing, and I think those are things that can be pretty good. We're cleansing debuffs on our allies, and they don't have any buffs to strip, but that's okay. But we're getting a lot of turn meter decrease too, which you can do on ice golem. So that's not bad. I think, any of the dungeon runs could be pretty decent. I wouldn't really look at using her in something like Spider, but again, two buff cleanse is not too bad. It's actually better than having somebody like a Doom Priest on your team. The weaken's not a bad thing to bring in. The poisons are whatever when it really comes to it, but that's okay. But another great thing, those 2 skills, they poison AoE, right? There's not a lot of champions that do poisons AoE, and this does that. One of the other things that's great, that A3 skill, it's not an attack, if you notice. So you're just placing the poisons. The A2 is definitely an attack, so you're going to break some things, but the A3 is not an attack. So you're not going to break stuff putting that out there. It's just going to be affinity is going to be the real deciding factor of whether those get placed or not. But for something like, we're seeing already how important being able to place something versus land a hit with it is for things like Hydra, right? I don't think she'd be great for Hydra, but we can test it. We'll see. They just have a lot of poison reduction stuff in Hydra, so it's less helpful there. I do see her being a pretty solid champion in Clan Boss, though. If you need a poisoner for Clan Boss, this seems like a pretty good one. You're not getting, so it's kind of like, let's look at a Bad Alcazar, right? Bad Alcazar puts 2 poisons AoE and cleanses your allies, right? So you can use her to cleanse the stun. Well, you could do the same thing with Guurda, right? She does a cleanse on 2 debuffs too, like a little bit extra, but that cleanse can deal with the stun, and it can deal with the affinity debuffs, your choice, not both, but one or the other. And then on top of that, you're getting 4 poisons plus weaken. I could definitely see that being pretty solid. Now, obviously her A1 isn't very helpful, but my guess is all these things are going to be, booked down to a 3-turn cooldown. And if that's the case, this is actually a pretty solid Clan Boss champion, right? You're getting 4 poisons, you're getting a weaken debuff, and you're getting a cleanse. And as we know with Clan Boss, you're just trying to bring in as many skills as you can to provide synergy for your team. This would do that. So not a bad champion. I don't think it's anybody we're going to get super excited about. But for our login champions too, if we look at it as login champions, this is a very unique login champion, right? We don't have anybody in there. I don't think we have anybody in there that does a full cleanse for us. We don't have anybody in there that does poisons for us. This is a pretty nice little login champion. It kind of rounds out the cache of champions that we have, right? I mean, I honestly feel like you could almost build a full Clan Boss team now, just with login champions. Probably probably not something we want to do, but we're getting close to that point, right? But that's not bad. You know, I think she's going to be okay. Nothing everybody's going to go crazy over, but for a login champion, somebody that's free coming along, I actually prefer this to somebody like Cleopatrix. I think she has way more usage for most people in this game. Now, by the time she comes around, you've been playing this game for a year and a half or so, it's probably not as useful as it would be if this was an earlier champion to get. I would much prefer having this champion being earlier in the rotation instead of like a Tanix or you know, somebody along that line. It's just somebody a little bit sooner to pick up. I feel like then this champion could be really, really useful. But let's say you've been playing for a while, you haven't been able to pull the right champions. I think there's definitely some potential with this, using her in Clan Boss, you know. I could easily see pairing her with a Martyr. Now you have your decreased defense, you have your weaken, you've got your cleanse, you even got your poisons. Now all you have to do with your other 3 slots is, you know, bring in decreased attack and you're pretty much set, right? Maybe some allied protection, some healing for sure. But I mean, that's a big thing. When you're bringing in multiple abilities, that becomes what's key, I think, for being really good at the higher ends of this game. Having champions that can do multiple things for you really helps a lot. So, you know, there she is. It's Guurda Bogbrew. You know, kind of an interesting champion there. I'm not super excited about this as our login champion, but I don't think this is a bad champion at all, and I think there's going to be uses for her. By the time, of course, we get her, if you've been playing the game that long, you're probably going to end up just, you know, kind of keeping her in the vault. She's probably not going to make anybody's main team. But, you know, until we get to fully test her either, we're really not going to know exactly how good she is. So I try not to pass too much judgment right away. You know, she's not bad, you know, not great, not bad, but it's a free login reward champ, so hard to complain too much. Anyway, guys, that's all we got for today. If you like this, hit that like, subscribe. Until next we meet, I'm the Deadwood Jedi.